Hey guys, and welcome to Top Channel 101, and today we're going to be making this simulation effect inside Blender. We're going to create a simple garden, add some pavement, and make it cave in. If you want to get the project files, you can get it on my Gumroad page, Patreon, and my YouTube membership page. I'm going to start by creating a cube. This is going to be our brick, so I'll scale it down, scale it on the Y, apply scale. I want to add some detail to this. Tab into edit mode, use Ctrl B to bevel the edges, just like that. You can create different patterns to make this a bit like a pavement. So I'm going to rotate this 90 degrees and just duplicate it on the Y, just like that. I can grab this, Shift D, duplicate this on the X, just like that. Make sure that these lines are matching correctly. We have an issue here. We don't have enough gap in this direction. So I'm just going to tab into edit mode and just scale this on the Y just a bit. And one other thing I want to do is make sure that these are all linked objects. So I'm going to use Ctrl L, link object data, so that I can edit this in the Y, and that way they match like that. With this, I can use Alt D, duplicate this on the X, making sure that I have enough room and enough gap between these pavements. Because we're going to be using the rigid body simulation system, which doesn't like objects intersecting. So yeah, I think that's the width I want. Can duplicate this, Shift D on the Y, and then repeat this using Shift R a few times. So with this, I can select everything, go to the rigid body system, rigid body active, hit play. They should all fall down. Now you can see they're quite slow. That's because there are too many, and we're using the convex half collision shape, which is more computational intensive. We can change this. You just hold down Alt to change the setting for everything selected. Change this to box. That should be lighter on our simulation. I'm also going to add a ground so that these don't fall down. Bring this down, apply scale, give it a rigid body type passive. If I hit play, now this is exploding out just like that. So let's make a few changes. I'm going to change this to box, which is a faster collision shape. And you can see now we are getting better results, and these are not exploding. Our simulation is quite stable as well. That's what we have. Now another thing I want to do is create a destruction force that goes through this road, and to do that I'm going to use a curve object. So Shift A, let's add a curve. I'm going to edit this. Let me just draw it directly. So a path that runs through this. Let me pull this up, go to the physics tab, and give this a force field type. The shape, let's use curve because we want to use the curve shape. If I hit play, nothing seems to happen. So what I'm going to do is just increase the strength to something like 1000. Now you can see that a force in the shape of our curve is applied to our bricks, but it's being applied infinitely, which is not what we want. So what we're going to do is set a maximum distance or a fall off, let's say of 1 meter. Let's try to bring this down to 0.1. Yeah, so that only the bricks that are within that range are pushed away. Now, one other thing I want to do is I don't want the boundary bricks to be pushed away. So what I'm going to do, let me first hide these and select this boundary, make a simple selection to be of a type passive. That way they are still part of the simulation, but they can't be pushed to the side. So that way we get a more interesting simulation. Now, the problem we're having is that now these bricks don't have anywhere to go, so they're just stuck there. One other thing we could do is, let me first select everything here and just move it into a collection called bricks. What we can do is, let's look at our force here. If I bring it below the bricks, this force will be pushing these bricks up just like that. And that's exactly what we want. If you want them to be pushed down, you just bring the curve up and they'll be pushed down. But because we have a ground object, which I can change the viewport display to where they have nowhere to go. So one other thing I want to do, or what I had in my final thing, is that this path, this force or distraction was animated just like that. So let's do that. To animate the force, just go to the curve settings and make sure you have, in the bevel settings, you have a depth to give this some thickness. And only when you have that, will you be able to animate this value here. Actually, I want this to start from here and go this side. So I'll just animate this start value. Now I can start at frame 1. I want this to have it at something like 0.81. And at frame 100, you can set this to 0 so that the force has moved through this. And you can see, you can even start to see how it's pushing. Let me put it down so that it's pushing everything up. Perfect. In my version, you can see the ground is caving in and these bricks are falling in. So to do that, we're going to add some deformation to this ground plane. Let me bring it back to textured, add a few subdivisions, just like that. Doesn't have to be that large, so something like that. Let's make this cave in. One thing I realized in my experiments, the deformations done in geometry nodes are not applied in the rigid body simulation. Let's use shape keys here to demonstrate what I'm trying to do. So if I deform this using shape keys, so I'm going to turn off relative so that this mesh is animated like this. Set a keyframe there and a keyframe, and here set a keyframe so that we have the ground animated like this. First of all, we need to make sure that the deformation on the mesh are added into consideration. If I have this deformation on the mesh in the collision shape, we need to change the collision shape to mesh and mesh deforming. That way, these deformations are added into consideration as the mesh is deforming. Now you see that this explodes immediately, and that's because our sensitivity is quite high. We need to bring this is just the minimum distance between each mesh, and 0.04 seems to be too high. So let's try 0.01. That might still be too high. Let's select these bricks, Shift G, and select all of them, and also bring their collision margin to 0.01. Perfect. Now you can see that everything works. Yeah, you can see that they're collapsing into our ground, which is great. But if we did this deformation using geometry nodes, it won't work. So we need a way to transfer the deformation we want onto a mesh that doesn't have geometry nodes. And it's actually quite simple. So let me first remove these shape keys. Yeah, make sure that this is still set to deforming. I want to work on geometry nodes, but when I hit play, because we're still running a simulation in the background, my viewport is quite slow. So while I'm working, I can disable the simulation for now of the rigid body system by going under the scene settings and turn off rigid body. Split this, go to geometry nodes, select this, new, and I'll bring in my curve. If I just look at this object, I can use a proximity node, geometry proximity, to generate a mask. And if I look at this, you can see that this mask grows just like that. So I can use this with a set position and just push, use a combine, and push these vertices down. Just like that. I can use a map range to cut off some of their deformation. So let's do something like that, and yeah, something like that. The edges are too sharp, so I'll use a blur node, a blur attribute to blur the effect just a bit. And it seems that this has been pushed up for some reason, so I'll just use a math node, and bring this back where it should be. So we get that. One other thing you need to do is make sure that this is set to relative so that the deformation is exactly where we want. If I try to use this deformation in the rigid body simulation, let's turn that back on. Our rigid bodies, well, you see that these bricks will not fall into the caving ground, and that's because the rigid body system doesn't seem to recognize deformations from geometry nodes. So what I'm going to do is just go back to frame 1 or frame 0 and turn off this, and let's duplicate this above. So I have two meshes. For this one, I'm going to remove geometry nodes and add a surface deform, and I can use this as a target so that I can transfer the deformations on this onto this. I just need to make sure that this is really close, and then bind. And if I bring back geometry nodes here, you can see now the deformations on this mesh. Let me first turn off the simulation. You can see the deformation on this mesh are being applied to this one, and since the deformation on this are not directly from geometry nodes, we can use the rigid body system. The rigid body system will work on them. So I'm just going to bring them. Now that we have done that, you can see that these bricks are now falling into our collapsed ground. If it doesn't seem to work, just make sure that the original mesh doesn't have any collision settings on. So if it has a passive rigid body type, remove it as well. That way it doesn't interfere with the collisions of this. Now we have something like this, and I think everything works as expected. This path can be edited to go in a different direction. From here, let's go into a time lapse of just layering other effects, like creating the garden and just adding different details to this to make it pretty. Again, project files are going to be in the description, and I'm using Botanical, the tree and vegetation library, tree, grass and vegetation library for the grass and flowers that you're seeing. So if you want to get it, links are going to be in the description as well, and other add-ons that I used in here. Thanks for watching. Enjoy the time lapse.
nightmares in my head, I fear that the thoughts build up until I can't hear, that my mind fills up into a creature, and it haunts me somewhere much deeper. Anxiety, filling up every space, no privacy. And silently, it could build and build until you finally see, whoa, it's taking over, damn, no closure, moving closer. No exposure, I just wanna be a loner. Some can't stay sober, looking over all their shoulders, like moving boulders just to get out of the home. It sucks, I've had enough, I don't wanna feel the stuck under the rug, all my problems that I shove. I got nightmares in my head, I fear that the thoughts build up until I can't hear, that my mind fills up into a creature, and it haunts me somewhere much deeper. I got nightmares in my head, I fear that the thoughts build up until I can't hear, that my mind fills up into a creature, and it haunts me somewhere much deeper. I've been feeling weird, I can't seem to focus good enough, nothing's really clear, sometimes it could be a little tough. I just need to feel like the end's in sight for me, but let's be really real, anxiety can foggy all this stuff. I've been feeling weird, I can't seem to focus good enough, nothing's really clear, sometimes it could be a little tough. I just need to feel like the end's in sight for me, but let's be really real, anxiety can foggy all this stuff. It sucks when you finally feel like giving up. Oh God, no luck, everything feels like you're sticky stuck. I'm lost, handcuffed to the bed where I sleep, don't give a fuck. Can't stop, unplug, feeling overwhelmed, I think I've had enough. Gotta find a way to get some energy, gotta find someone who's a good friend of me. I need purpose to make it all worth it, I'm still searching and I'm still learning. I want a life that's filled with memories, not a life with regret in front of me. I need focus to keep me from hopeless psychosis if I keep moping. I got nightmares in my head, I fear that the thoughts build up until I can't hear, that my mind fills up into a creature, and it haunts me somewhere much deeper. I got nightmares in my head, I fear that the thoughts build up until I can't hear, that my mind fills up into a creature, and it haunts me somewhere much